Today, I'd like to teach you a simple formula for presenting information and ideas of any kind in a way that is highly engaging and highly memorable. And I learned this formula and immediately started using it in videos I was making, blog posts, even speaking from the stage. And whatever type of thing that you teach, if you learn this formula and start to apply it, it's going to make a big difference in the way that your ideas land with the people that you're speaking to. And in a plot twist, I'm actually going to teach you this formula using the formula itself, which is a great example of something that we call looped input. Anyway, with that said, and that challenge said, let's get started. In case you don't know me, my name is Olly Richards. I'm the founder of StoryLearning.com. It's a multi-seven-figure online education business. I'm also a mentor and advisor to other online education entrepreneurs. The formula for presenting information in a very engaging way: point, story, metaphor, summary. Those 4 parts: point, story, metaphor, summary. Now, I remember first hearing this from Frank Kern on a podcast. He was talking about how he would study a lot of the great speakers, the great stage speakers, people like Zig Ziglar, who just have a habit of presenting information in a way that you just remember. You remember the stories that they tell. You remember that you learned something from them. And he paid attention to a lot of these guys and looked at the way that they taught, and he realized that they all followed this similar kind of formula. They would make the point that they want to make very clearly, very simply. They would then tell a story that exemplifies the point. Lastly, they would come up with a metaphor that quite nicely describes the point they're trying to make, and then finally recap the point itself. So it's point, story, metaphor, and then summary, or recapping the point. Once he landed on this formula, he realized he saw it everywhere and started using it himself. And I remember when I heard this, I thought, well, that's really, really useful, because, you know, sometimes when you're making a video or you're speaking from stage, you don't know exactly the best way to present something. And so you can often tie yourself in knots thinking about how you should present something. And this struck me as a really, really useful formula, because whatever it is that you're trying to teach, if you just follow this formula, it gives you a shorthand for presenting something very clearly and very succinctly, knowing for sure that it's going to land well and be remembered. So after I heard that podcast, I loved it, and I went home and I remember writing on a post-it note that same formula: point, story, metaphor, summary. I stuck that post-it note up on my camera in my office. So the idea was that whenever I was making a video about anything, I would try to use that formula. And sure enough, over the years, I practiced it and I used it as often as I could. Now, about a year ago, when I first started my business personal brand, which is this that you're watching now, with the videos and the newsletters that I write, this was the perfect time to start using this formula, because a lot of what I talk about here is there's more abstract ideas, stuff that can't always be explained really, really clearly. And so I'm looking for ways to talk about it in a way that's engaging. But it's more than that. Like with this YouTube channel, for example, when I started it, I knew that I didn't want to spend hours on each video. I didn't have that kind of time. I needed to be able to make really quick, simple videos like this. And so I started to use this formula again that I learned from Frank: point, story, metaphor, summary. And then sure enough, I started recording these videos of me walking around the hills of Hobbitshire and occasionally on the beach. And I would record these videos using that formula. And I started to notice something really interesting, which was that I would start to get comments and emails from people saying, oh, I really loved that I really remembered that thing that you said, that thing that you taught, especially the stories and the metaphors. And then another interesting thing happened, which was my video team who edit these videos started to experiment making shorts using, sure enough, the story and metaphor parts of the videos that I was making. So that showed me that the stuff I was making, the content was landing really, really clearly. It feels a little bit like deciding to cook a slap-up dinner for friends and inviting a bunch of people around to the house, and then waking up on a Saturday morning and thinking, right, gonna have to spend the whole day cooking. But you walk into the kitchen and someone has already done the shopping for you and prepped all of the food. So all you have to do is sort of turn up and do the fun bit, which is the cooking. And then everyone else is sort of sitting around the table looking at you thinking, how the hell is this guy so chilled doing something so complicated, such a big piece of work? But the secret is that you had a method there all along that was helping you through it. So to summarize, when you've got a piece of information that you want to get across and you want to land, try doing it in this way: point, story, metaphor, summary. And if you paid attention, you would have noticed that what I just explained to you was following that exact formula. First of all, I told you the thing. I didn't sort of dither around and hide the point until, build the suspense and hide the point until later in the video. I told you it up front: point, story, metaphor, summary. Then I told you a story about how I actually discovered it. Then I told you the metaphor about cooking a dinner and having someone already prepping all the food for you. And then finally, I summarized it. So that's the idea. Now let me walk you through the process of how I might actually come up with these different parts to the formula. It's not rocket science, but it might help you to hear my thought process. So there was a while ago where I was making a video on delegation or over-delegation. It's the idea that many entrepreneurs follow this kind of dogma of delegation and end up trying to outsource the very things that the founder should be responsible for in order to grow their business, often sales and marketing. So I had my point, don't over-delegate. And then I had to think about a time when I actually kind of came into contact with this idea, something that I could tell that would make it memorable. And I remember talking to a friend of mine about this. She was trying to grow her business, and she knew that she needed to do more sales and marketing, and yet the way she was going about it was trying to hire someone to do that. And when we talked about it, it was apparent that she kind of felt that she needed to hire for it because that's what you're kind of supposed to do. And we talked about it, and I suggested that maybe it's something that she should spend some time doing, and that would be time well spent for her. So that was the story. And next, I needed a metaphor. And sometimes the metaphors are the hardest ones to come up with, but I thought about, well, who can't delegate and yet is still very successful? And I thought about Will Smith. So famous Hollywood actor, one of the most richest, most successful people out there, but they can't delegate. They have a new film come in. They're not able to say, oh yeah, I'm going to send my buddy over here to do it instead of me because I have to delegate. So it is possible to be very rich and successful without actually delegating. It comes down to knowing which bits you should do and which bits you shouldn't. So that was my metaphor. So I have my point, my story, and my metaphor. Of course, the last part is the summary, which is just restating the point. And that turned into the video where I said, don't over-delegate. Here's a story about a friend of mine who was getting this wrong. Here is a metaphor about Will Smith, who can't delegate his main role. And so don't over-delegate. That was the framework. So from there, I was simply able to go off on a walk, talk through all the points on camera, and it made for a really compelling video that people really enjoyed. And so that is the formula: point, story, metaphor, summary. And if you like videos like this where we talk about the psychology behind what we do and why we do it, then you might enjoy this video over here where I talk all about the psychology of building a multi-million-dollar business. Click this video, check it out, let me know what you think.